Hello, everyone. My name is Jaime Chambers, and I'm a PhD student in anthropology at Washington State University. Nearly everywhere humans live, so do dogs, but much ambiguity surrounds them in the ethnographic record. Across and within cultures, they can be seen as threats and allies, predators and working partners, subjects of violence and affection. Distinctions between humans and animals also vary widely cross-culturally, and I became interested in how these themes overlap. So for this study, I used the Human Relations Area files to explore perceptions of dogs as persons. I identify key ontological perceptions surrounding dogs here, and using multiple correspondence analysis, I construct a scaled variable with potential to quantitatively track human-like treatment or perceptions of dogs. Ontology, the study of a people's view of reality, encompasses beliefs about the nature of being. Personhood is an important idea within this, a perception of individual identity, motives, and intent. Some cultures attribute personhood only to humans, or only to some humans, but others see it as a trait inherent to many forms of life. Brightman and others describe this as human-like subjectivity, while Hill uses the term relational ontology for systems where animals are viewed as having agency, constituted through interaction. In other words, a person doesn't have to be a human. Dogs have lived alongside humans longer and in more places than any other domesticated species, in a relationship shaped by coevolution and culture. Claude Lévi-Strauss described dogs as liminal creatures, often integrated into human lives, yet regarded as incomplete humans. So dogs offer an interesting species for exploring ontologies of personhood. So with this background, I aimed to explore two key questions. What patterns are found in ontological perceptions of dogs? And can these perceptions be characterized quantitatively to facilitate cross-cultural comparison? So this study began as an exploratory project on human-dog relationships in ethnographic texts using the Human Relations Area files standard cross-cultural sample of 186 societies. And a grounded theory approach guided the data collection, with the aim of setting aside pre-existing ideas and generating a theory systematically from patterns that surfaced. A search for dog content using the terms on the right yielded over 15,000 paragraphs in the beginning, and over time, our team of 4 researchers coded text in an iterative process, creating new codes to capture meanings as we encountered them, yet comparing them to what we'd already created to consider their relationship to each other. We ended up with data for 152 cultures in the end, since some texts hadn't yet been digitized at the time of data collection. But the final data set contained 8,000 paragraphs and 257 codes describing concepts related to dogs. And perceptions of dogs as people arose as one of those patterns. So for qualitative analysis, I targeted text relevant to dogs' liminal nature or comparison to humans. And as I coded texts, I clustered them by sub-themes, things like dogs as substitutes for humans or dogs treated like children. And then I considered the relationship between those sub-themes to build a theory about what I was seeing, which I'll discuss in the findings. Then to assess whether ontological perceptions of dogs could be characterized quantitatively, I used multiple correspondence analysis, a geometric data reduction technique for examining associations between variables based on the chi-square distance between them. And my choice of variables in the table on the right followed the qualitative findings regarding human-like perceptions of dogs. Lastly, to facilitate investigation about whether dogs' personhood may vary with socio-ecological traits, I used the MCA results to construct a scaled variable. To evaluate its viability, I tested its relationship with other variables in the table on the right that are relevant to human-dog relationships, using Spearman's row correlations and ordinary least square regression. And I'll talk more about this in the findings. So from the qualitative analysis, 3 big themes emerged. One was dogs as a type of person on equal or near equal footing with humans. Second was dogs as a reference point for lowly or subhuman status. And then between those 2 poles, a more liminal state, dogs as persons only under certain conditions. I'll present some examples next, but I want to acknowledge the limitation that I'm pulling these from their respective cultural contexts. Their full richness lies beyond the scope of this study, but I aim here to give an overarching view of the main patterns. So on one end of the spectrum, some cultures characterize dogs as persons. For example, the Talensi describe dogs as human-like because they understand human speech and are capable of good and bad behavior. The Veda call dogs are four-footed persons, and the Taraja call them our equal, while the Kapuuku conceive of dogs as the only non-humans with a soul. Other cultures place constraints on dogs' use based on their similarity to humans. The Tiv and Lepcha both see eating a dog as akin to eating a human, stating that a dog is the same thing as a man, while the Kanzo place a taboo on selling dogs based on the logic that someone who sold a dog might sell humans as well. Notions of dogs as persons also arise through treating dogs like children or family members. Among the Tehuelche and the Comanche, dogs are babied by childless couples. Ethnographies of the Munduruku and Copper Inuit even describe women breastfeeding puppies. And some groups grant dogs human kinship terms. The picture on the right shows a Nushalk couple who didn't have children to give their ancestral family names, so they gave them to their dogs instead. On the other end of the spectrum, some texts position dogs as distinct from or beneath humans. Their subhuman status is invoked linguistically to insult another person's humanity, and this was a recurring theme around women particularly. For example, in the Burmese saying, "A woman is not as noble as a male dog," or the Albanian saying that wives are a little better than a dog and a little worse than a horse. Dogs also were invoked regarding inappropriate behavior outside social norms. For example, the Central Thai, the Kung, and the Sangha all drew comparisons to dogs when it came to incest, and the Yurok made similar comparisons of people who broke menstruation taboos, saying they were worse than a dog, the lowest form of life. Between these two ends of the pole, dogs occupy a more ambiguous state of being. Their capacity to follow and understand human communication raises tension because so much of their behavior is not human-like at all. For example, the Northern Paiute forbid asking dogs questions for fear the dogs might answer, and the Samang and Iban forbid joking or laughing about dogs for the same reason. A big theme here was that many cultures don't see personhood as an intrinsic quality possessed by all dogs, but rather the product of a close relationship. Basically, any dog has the potential to be a person, but only dogs with a close bond with a human attain that potential. For example, the Nivik believe each human has a dog soulmate called a prisky, which can't be sold, given away, or mistreated. When that human dies, their soul lives in the prisky, and that dog is allowed to live indoors, sleep in that human's bed, and eat from their bowl. But not every dog is afforded this status as a person. It's only constructed through close bond to a human. Mourning and burial of dogs echoes this idea as a practice for dogs who've attained human-like regard. Among the Kuoma and Kapuuku, funerary treatment for special dogs followed human customs, like placing the corpse in a tree or a cave. And the Creek, Mi'kmaq, and Ojibwe were documented to bury someone's favorite dog alongside them. Together, this points to a recurring idea that dogs' personhood is often relational, a potential only made real through an individual bond. So qualitative analyses revealed this initial spectrum of variation surrounding dogs' ontological status, and I used key indicators to explore whether these perceptions can be characterized quantitatively with multiple correspondence analysis. At the culture level, these indicators showed reliability as a unidimensional scale, with the first dimension accounting for 92% of the variance. And you can see here that 10 out of the 11 items showed strong contributions, with the strongest down below by affection, kin, personhood, and family. But shifter, which describes dogs changing between canine and human forms, dropped out because it didn't satisfy the threshold for a significant contribution above the mean. I then used those 10 items to construct a variable for quantitatively tracking human-like treatment or perceptions of dogs, which I call the personhood scale. I evaluated the scale's viability by testing correlations with other variables relevant to human-dog relationships. So first, I looked at the absence of dogs in a culture's recent history, which can be intuitively expected to have no correlation with perceptions of dogs. And as expected, both tests reflected a non-significant correlation with personhood. I then looked at the relationship between personhood and temperature, the idea being that dogs overheat easily compared to humans, so climate may constrain their ability to fill working roles for humans, and therefore their potential to be seen as persons. The Spearman's Rho matrix showed a non-significant correlation between colder temperatures and personhood, while OLS regression showed a significant positive relationship. So this is a bit mixed, but there may be some relationship between dogs' utility in different climates and their potential as persons. Lastly, I looked at two variables relevant to cooperative hunting, since recent hypotheses point to hunting as a driver of dog domestication and coevolution. When it came to a culture's dependence on hunting, both tests showed a weak relationship with dogs' personhood, but the hunting with dogs variable mediated this relationship. So when it was removed from the model, dependence on hunting did correlate with dogs' personhood. Similarly, both tests revealed a significant correlation between use of dogs in hunting and personhood. And this potential link between dogs' personhood and hunting is especially interesting, and a couple of things could be happening here. It may reflect generalizations made by other scholars that hunter-gatherers tend to perceive a more fluid boundary between humans and animals, or it may suggest that hunting partnerships go hand in hand with seeing dogs like people. And this potential link between dogs' personhood and their utility to humans raises questions that would be interesting to explore in the future. We mobilized the personhood scale last year to test some major hypotheses in the Journal of Ethnobiology, but there's much left to explore around dog significance to subsistence and human investment in their care. Ultimately, cross-cultural variation in canine personhood may reflect variable perceptions of human-animal distinctions, as well as dogs' enduring relationships with humans across diverse environments. This work offers a starting point for exploring humans' regard for dogs as persons, pests, pets, and everything in between. And I want to say thank you to the rest of my research team and thesis committee, and especially to Dr. Rob Quinlan for guiding many of the quantitative analyses for this project. Thank you.